Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Town and Country Planning Association webinar, Child-Friendly Planning and Design Insights and Experiences from European Cities. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. We've got a packed lineup with some really great speakers who obviously have lots and lots of experience and first-hand knowledge of this area, so it's really exciting to have them all on the call with us. My name is Gemma Hyde and I'm a Projects and Policy Manager for the Town and Country Planning Association, and my work focuses on healthier placemaking. Today's webinar is possible due to the ongoing support of Sport England, who support our healthy placemaking work and allow us to provide this event to you for free. Next slide, please. The Town and Country Planning Association are a charity with a vision of homes, places and communities in which everyone can thrive. And our mission is to challenge, inspire and support people to create healthy, sustainable and resilient places that are fair for everyone. Our work covers new communities, healthy homes and neighbourhoods, climate change and community participation. We are a membership organisation, and if you would like to know more about becoming a member, then please visit our website. Next slide, please. So as I said, it's quite a packed agenda this morning, and very shortly I will hand over to Tim Gill to set the scene and then on to our speakers from 4 European cities. Please, throughout the webinar, you can use the questions box at the bottom of the screen to leave questions for our speakers, and we will attempt to leave time to cover as many as we can at around 11:40. The webinar is being recorded and will be hosted on our website a few days after the webinar is done. Next slide, please. So today's webinar is a part of a series of publications and events that the TCPA have been working on in the last few years about children, young people and the built environment. If we want to have and raise healthy and happy children, we firmly believe that where children live matters. So there are lots of resources on our website which are free to access, including event recordings like this one, blogs, case studies, and the report that we released in December, Raising the Healthiest Generation in History. Next slide, please. In addition, the TCPA is also a partner of the Voice Opportunity Power Youth Engagement Toolkit, developed by ZCD Architects with Sport England and Grosvenor. The toolkit is a free resource with practical guidance on how to involve young people, sort of ages 11 to 18, in the way that places get built and managed. And actually on the 24th of March, we are running a lunch and learn session on the toolkit. And if you would like to register to join that webinar, then please visit the events page on the TCPA's website. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over to Tim Gill. Tim's an independent scholar, writer and consultant on childhood and a global advocate for children's play and mobility. He is the author of Urban Playground, How Child-Friendly Urban Planning and Design Can Save Cities, and No Fear, Growing Up in a Risk-Averse Society. And we're really grateful for Tim's time this morning and his help in organising this webinar. And I will hand over to you, Tim.
Great, thank you very much, Gemma. Big thanks to the Town and Country Planning Association for getting this happening, and to you, Gemma, your colleagues and all our 4 speakers. There's been a lot of work getting this ready, and I'm excited, so I'm going to press on. And I'm going to start by saying that when we're thinking about children's spatial lives, where children play, how they get around, one thing that helps us get a handle on this is thinking about what that's like for children, how it's changed over time and particularly over the generations. So my next slide, please, helps to kind of make that a bit more real. So this is a slide that shows you what you might call the roaming range or the home territory of 4 children. They're in 4 generations of the same family who all grew up in the same city. So that big blob that takes up most of the map is the roaming range of the great-grandfather in this family at the age of 8. So in each case, it's the age of 8. And you can see he could go about 10 kilometers, 6 miles across the city on his own. Then you can see how the circles shrink with each generation until you've got the yellow dot up in the top left, that's the son in his family. He's actually allowed to walk to the end of his street, which is probably more of a kind of right to roam than most 8-year-olds in England, certainly. So what this vignette, this anecdote captures really nicely is what you might call the shrinking horizons of childhood, which I think is one of the most important and neglected changes in childhood. And it's a really compelling starting point for conversations and for reflection and for kind of prompting action on why this matters and what we need to do about it. And just to be clear, it's a complex story, but one reason for this change is undoubtedly changes in the nature, in the built form of neighbourhoods. And in fact, I've got a modest collection of such maps. Next slide, please. Here's a few more from some other European countries. And next slide, I was delighted to see in Sandra's slide deck another example. This is from Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia. So yeah, and I think it shows you how this way of starting to get into the topic can really open up and help to reframe the ways children relate to cities in a way that makes it quite meaningful and real and has a kind of emotional pull. So when we're thinking about children's lives, I hope we'd agree that one of the things that makes up a good childhood, next slide please, is that as children grow up, they gradually are able to spread their wings, to sort of expand their horizons, to have everyday adventures, to kind of get real hands-on experience of the people and places around them. And that's what these images are trying to capture. But when we ask ourselves, well, what's the standard offer to children in terms of the built environment? You know, how do we shape neighborhoods typically around our thinking about children? Well, all too often, next slide, please. This is the extent of our offer to children. Now, this is a particularly woeful example, but I think it's also the wrong model. And you'll see a lot of implied a kind of critique or messages this morning about really moving well away from this model that a child-friendly place is a place where there are reservations for children. Of course, there's a place for playgrounds, but we'd certainly want them to look rather more engaging than this one. But I'm going to offer you, and I think our other speakers are going to support this offer, of a different vision for a child-friendly place. So I'm going to briefly touch on, next slide please, what my definition of child-friendly planning is, and an emerging definition, why I think it matters, and just a couple of slides on what's happening here in the UK. Next slide. So the first thing to realize is that when we ask ourselves what makes neighborhoods work for families, there are really three kind of planks or bases. So the first is housing. Any neighborhood that doesn't have family appropriate housing is just not going to be a place where families will live and children will grow up. We also need services, of course, that families need: schools, childcare, health, and so on. But it's the third plank that you can see here, the public realm, that I'm focusing on, and that I think we'll be hearing about this morning. And this recognizes that really, you know, it's only when children get beyond their homes and the institutions that they spend time in that they really start to become citizens and to have a kind of, you know, a full sort of human life. So let's get more specific. And my next slide offers you a framework or a way of framing what makes a place child-friendly in physical terms. And to unpack this, you're looking at a framework that's got two dimensions. So the first dimension, next slide please, is the kind of things to do dimension. A child-friendly place has got lots of choice and variety of places to go and things to do. But that's not enough on its own. We also need to think about the other dimension on this, which is the children's mobility dimension. How easy is it in a neighborhood or a town or a city for children to get around, especially as they grow up, of course, to get around on their own, which means on foot or on wheels. So it's only, next slide, where you've got both a lot of choice and variety of places to go and things to do in a neighborhood, and it's really easy for children of different ages to get around, that you're in that child-friendly quadrant. So yeah, think mobility and choice and variety of spaces. Next slide, please. So in my book, I hold up one neighborhood as a kind of lighthouse, or the ultimate child-friendly neighborhood. There's a question mark there because it's a provocation, but this is the neighborhood of Vauban. It's quite a large district on the outskirts of Freiburg in Germany. You can see the aerial there. It's mixed use, it's apartment living. It's quite big, about 6,000 population. But what really marks Vauban out from other such districts is that it's, to all intents and purposes, car-free. So when you get down to the level of the street and the spaces between the buildings, taking the cars away creates huge opportunities for creating vibrant, green, sociable space. And just a couple of slides. Next slide, please. These are two examples. One of the things that's interesting about Vauban, it doesn't really have a lot of conventional playgrounds. What it does have is play offers and incentives and structures that are woven into the space between the buildings. Okay, so that's the sort of picture, the framework, and if you like, the direction of travel. Next slide, please. Why does this idea matter? In my book, I spoke to leaders and people involved in about a dozen cities and asked them this question: why were they supporting work on making their own city more child-friendly? And you can see from this slide that I really got three answers back. Some cities talked about, indeed, a focus on children, on their rights and health and well-being. A second group of cities talked about sustainability, and they realized this read across between making cities more child-friendly and making them more sustainable. And then there's a third group of cities that actually talked about the kind of hard-nosed economics of their city, that in simple terms, a city that is not able to attract and retain families is a city whose long-term economic prospects are not great. And you'll see examples of all three of those rationales in the talk. Next slide, please. I also just want to say a brief word about children's participation and their views. And we know a lot about what children like and what they don't like in cities based on surveys and research from around the world. And the consistent messages that come back, as you can see in this short table, really match closely with that two-dimensional framework that I have shared with you. Next slide. So my final couple of slides are going to talk about what's happening here in the UK, summarising a helpful report from the RTPI, the Royal Town Planning Institute. There are differences and variations across the UK between the different devolved nations. There's some suggestion, I think, of interest in growing in the regional mayors, and there's been long-standing work in London, which I'll briefly summarise. Next slide. Unusually, London has a policy in its strategic plan on child-friendly cities. It has targets on creating playable space, a typology, guidance. There's material. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's probably it's more weighty and has had a bigger influence in London than in some other cities. And there are some local authorities that are taking this topic seriously as well. So my last slide pulls some of this together. It's a quote from Chris Boardman, who's not only head of Active Travel England, he's also chair of Sport England, who talks a lot about children in his work, and the message that children are a kind of a way of getting an emotional grasp on this topic. But there's a lot of detail and a lot of practicalities to explore as well. And that's what I'm hoping you're going to hear from our speakers. So I'm going to invite our first speaker to start now. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Maria Truñó, who is the Director of Alliance Education 360 in Barcelona. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, thanks to the organizers, and also it's a pleasure to share this space with other nice colleagues from all around Europe. I'm going to tell you 5 key ideas and 2 stories about the Barcelona's plan for play. Next slide, please. And I would like to start with an invitation, as Tim suggested, about emotional link. So I would invite you to slide down in this slide that you can see. And at the end of the day, the plan for play, it's also an invitation to everyone to really improve our attitudes and behaviors about playing. Next, please. The first key idea is at the very beginning of the plan for play, the entry points were mostly focused on children's right to play, health for everyone, community bonds and strength, and urban resilience. But in the local policies agenda and the political opportunities, and they were more focused about climate emergency, and because of bad situation also, and a very important entry point was road safety, and also care and feminist urbanism as a frame. Next, please. The second idea is that obviously it takes a process to make a plan rolled by the city council. It took 2 years in a participatory process involving obviously the children through surveys, focus groups, and mainly co-creation specific projects, but also research. It was the first time that Barcelona designed, collect, and analyze data related to play opportunities, play affordances, play uses. So geolocalizing opportunities by kinds of activities. So there was a clear before and after the plan in terms to understand what the city offers to our kids and to all the citizens. Obviously, it's not only a thing that implies urbanism unit, but also parks and gardens, education, disabilities units, public health, sustainability, gender, children, of course, mobility, as Tim suggested. So this needs setting up a circuit, an internal circuit in the administration, trying to join with a view of a trans-sector circuits to really change the way to sing and to change the city. And also, if we talk about stakeholders, key player is a school, but not as an equipment, but as a community. So teachers, families, and kids. Next. The third key idea is we try to go to design the concept of playable city beyond the obvious. We would say that obvious are playgrounds and schoolyards in terms of playful infrastructure, but it's clear that children play everywhere. So surrounding schoolyards and playgrounds are also spaces that we have to transform and rethink. But there's also a third layer. It's the playable city, the whole city itself. So to also improve these playing affordances, changing sidewalks, streets, squares, beaches, and everything with a whole perspective of playful infrastructure. Next. So the main word would be playability. And the important point is that it's not a thing that, so the city has moved from a perspective of running playgrounds and focus on quantity of playgrounds or elements to planning play and also stay, following and making able that play occurs and play thrive in a playful ecosystem. And so playability is an important ingredient, is an issue in any kind of urban projects as an outdoor public service. And so it's more related to quality rather than quantity, and also this changing the perspective, so going clearly beyond playgrounds. Next. And as a fifth key idea of the plan is that we developed and we work through 3 criteria for quality in places. The first one is, as I said, this idea of focusing on activities, but not any kind of activities. The ones challenging and really creative and also diverse. So it's not only about swinging, but gliding, climbing, hiding, running. So we analyze the offer and the possibilities with this lens, just trying to really improve the diversity of the quality and of activities, also involving the space itself as a playful element towards the idea of really stimulates inclusive playing through all the diversities. The important point also of play in contact with nature, which is really concerning issue in our urban cities and in Barcelona because of the lack of green. When we also try to move this idea of playing alone and really analyze these opportunities to collaborative play, collective play, intergenerational play. And a very important point also, all the criteria to promote specific things like benches, shade, to really stimulate community life surrounding play or while children play. And obviously, in each playful place, it's part of a bigger and wider ecosystem, and this is also which is important to also think in terms of accessibility, as already Tim said. Next, please. So with these ideas in mind, I would like to focus in our first story, which is quite success story. It's about the strategy Let's Protect Schools. Up to now, 1 in 3 schools in the city, so more than 200, are already with their surrounding transformed. You can see in the picture, this is probably the most powerful transformation, and they are the key issues in this transformation of the school street, of the surrounding of school, by reducing car traffic lines and speed limits, removing car parking lines, extending the sidewalls, and also setting up protective fences. I've said that this is one of the most powerful because it's the full closure. There are other kind of interventions with partial closures or different kind of intervention depending on the school. But this is the most clear picture, so you can get the point of the strategy. Next, please. This strategy, unfortunately, started just after an accident that killed Hugo, a kid of 6 years old in this school that you can see in the picture. So there was a really touching and emotional situation that the mayor of the city took as a personal commitment, also to really generate the conditions that this will happen again. This, and also the very concerning poor air quality or pollution in the city, make made the really opportunity that it was not only a project or only a specific kind of intervention, but a strategy connected to the urban model. And this is why it took the big dimension that it took. Next, please. This Let's Protect Schools program was evaluated, and few of the main outcomes are that in these school streets, the motor vehicle traffic has been reduced between 35% to 95%, depending on the kind of closure, as I said before. And this is so important. It was analyzed what happened half an hour after the school. And the point is that there are 3 times more people using public space half an hour after school, if we compare before and after this urban transformation. And mainly, if we see the inclusive perspective of child-friendly, we see that there are 4 times more children than before, and very relevant also, more girls than boys. So we are really creating a perception of a more protective environment, and so with more opportunities to spontaneously play. However, there are also challenges, in this kind of strategy and program. First of all, there were clear tension with mobility unit in the city because of the changes in traffic, mainly when it involved changes in the main streets in the city, but also some neighborhoods resistant because they had the perception of that they were losing parking as a kind of privilege, but there were less parking, and they also some neighborhoods organized themselves to avoid changes in some schools streets. On the other side, there are also opportunities. Actually, it's not a costly intervention comparing to, for instance, naturalizing schoolyards in the city that were also done, which cost 3 times more, as you can see figures. And there's also an opportunity taking into account the social demand for more, better, and faster transforming school surroundings. Next, please. Here you can see this social, let's call it social movement, and which is run by parents and teachers associations and also neighborhood associations, who are they are called School Rebellion. And from the very beginning, 4 years ago, where there were only 20 schools, now there are more than 100 schools involved in these social, citizen, and families actions. As you can read, demanding for better health, safe space, less pollution, less noise, so fewer cars surrounding the school. Next, please. And from this first story, which is more, which is an initiative run and originated and implemented by the city council, I would like also to focus in other actions that go beyond the plan and go beyond this also dimension of the infrastructure, because the plan it implies changes and actions related to achieve more and better play opportunities in public space, with this idea of playful infrastructure in a playable city. Secondly, also this idea of stimulating outdoor play and physical activity habits and behavior because at the end of the day, you can have the opportunities, but the main point and an indicator is that people effectively play. So it's about behavior and playful uses in a play city. This is why how we understood the strategy. And next, please. And the third idea,
just to say, Maria, this is great stuff, but you've got about 4 more minutes.
Okay, and so just finishing this idea of apart from the infrastructure, apart from stimulating behavioral changes, we have to promote this paradigm shift where playing gains ground in public policies and agenda. And this is exactly what, next please, what it happened with this grassroots initiative called BC Bus. It's a very new way to live the city each Friday. Up to now, there are 17 school routes in all the city, where run by families, organized by themselves, but also with the authorization and kind of negotiation model with the city council. They are really changing the way to go to school. So it's an obvious and very playful and kind of happiness community and mobility community, changing also the paradigm, joining this idea of play and mobility in a one specific experience, vital experience of the kids. So the last slide is just to say thank you, and let's talk later on if you want it.
Thank you so much, Maria. Some of you are already putting questions into the Q&A. That's great. I'll just pull out a couple of themes that really leapt out for me. In Barcelona, what you see is a strategic and a value-driven program of work, and there's a lot to see. There's a lot to see in the city, almost whether you're interested in streets, parks and public spaces, schoolyards, linear parks, traffic reconfiguration. If you can get to Barcelona, have a look. It's amazing. And I also really like the way that you brought in, if you like, the software. That there's you know, we talk and we're interested in the hardware, the physical changes that we can make to cities, but let's not forget programming, community activities, events, the software side. Great. I'm now going to turn to our next speaker, and that is Sandra Štasselová from Bratislava. Sandra, the floor is yours.
Hello, Tim. Thank you. Can you hear me? Amazing. Okay, thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here. So you should already see my screen. Do you? Yes, it should be on. So yes, I'm from Metropolitan Institute of Bratislava, which is capital city of small country of Slovakia in Central Europe. And Slovakia has had democracy just since 35 years ago, which is connected to the many issues that we share with, of course, many countries worldwide. And the Metropolitan Institute was founded in 2019, and since then, the capital city has finally had an institution that is concerned with strategic planning, development, and public spaces, of course. And we have a website with lots of materials. I just put some slides on this manifesto, which is also translated in English. And it frames quite easily and clearly in around 40 pages what we actually do, what we talk about when we talk about public space, when we talk about walkable city. I selected a relevant chapter for my presentation. And yes, and basically what we are dealing with when we are dealing with streetscapes. but yet the most tangible, the main impact on public spaces of my institution has been reconstruction of public spaces, just like squares and parks, and the reconstruction has been steady but quite slow. And the growing concern about our budget issues and the pressure on value for money. I repeat, we were founded just 2019, so we are a very young institution, but still, even from inside of institution and also from the mayor's point of view, there is this pressure on how can we improve lives of people, and mainly of vulnerable groups, more effectively and more fast, of course. And yes, the mobility, since it is a very important function of public space, is natural way of how we can have impact. And in Bratislava, and especially in Bratislava, where in the past 20 years, just 20 years, the number of cars doubled. Not talking about those 35 years, that would be crazy number, crazy percentage of, but yes, it doubled in the past 2 decades. And the mobility has become, or mobility is now very explosive topic because it's an issue for many people. And we decided to, and because mobility is issue, and because the children are quite a large and important vulnerable group of users of public spaces, we decided to work on this intersection of these 2 topics, like how can we help children to have better access to active mobility, to independent mobility. And we have been trying to reframe the topic from mobility as moving from point A to point B to help of children. And we call our project City for Kids, or Mesto pre děti in Slovak language. And what we actually do is that we work with schools, and we work with schools as neighborhoods, and we work with schools as place-based communities. And as you can see on this map, this is map of Bratislava, and in Bratislava we have 61 primary publicly funded schools, and we have amazing distribution of those schools. We have 2/3 of people, all people that live in Bratislava, so 2/3 of them, 67% of them, live less than 5 minutes of walking to their closest school. And 95% live within 15 minutes of walking range. And this shows the situation that kids should be walking to school. A major part of the kids should be walking to school. And schools, besides they are centers of mobility, they are also place-based communities. The students of the schools, their parents, they live close around the schools, and they share the common ground. They share the neighborhood, and also they share the hope to live in a safe neighborhood. So this is like base for our project. Let's work with the schools. Let's try to improve the surrounding of the schools, and let's support active mobility of kids. And yes, I mean, in our project, besides we do the traffic calming, and what is very important, our participation is a very important pillar. So participation cuts through the whole project as it is. And we also do, we are talking about walking as a value, access to walking and access to independent mobility, and about access to free play, outdoor play. But this presentation is really focused on the mobility part of the project. So what we are actually doing, how are we improving the safety? First, we decided, or we agreed on the KPIs, like how are we gonna measure our impact? And as I mentioned, like so many kids live so close to the schools, yet very many kids are driven to schools. Like the numbers are quite shocking in some neighborhoods, as you will see later on in my presentation. But we decided to focus on those 2 KPIs. First is feeling of safety, and we have roughly around half of parents in nearly every school who doesn't feel safe, who doesn't feel that the situation around their school is safe. So every second parent doesn't feel safe around the schools. So this is very important KPI for us. We call it elite KPI. If you're not aware of the difference between elite KPIs and lag KPIs, please Google it up. It's like very, very useful. So our lead KPI is feeling of safety of the parents, and our lag KPI, like the final KPI, is the model split. And our goal is to improve feelings of safety and eventually change the model split so that we have more kids using active mobility. As I mentioned, important is participation, and participation is for us also data collection, but not only. We do a lot of surveying. We are doing lots of surveying. We are surveying kids, like older kids. We are doing online surveys of parents of the kids, and local residents. We're doing focus groups, but also we are working with kids. We're doing empathy walks and various age-appropriate workshops, and we're doing also like more soft events, play street and festivals. We collect a lot of objective data. This is drone footage that we use quite a lot. It's very useful if you're talking with important stakeholders to just shed some light on what is going on here. This is drone footage of one problematic crossing. You can see this weird snake of pedestrians that are finding their way amongst cars and trams. And this really helped us not only to count the numbers of what is going on there, but also to present it in front of traffic police, in front of the mayor, and to get support of, to get their attention. Like, this is really problematic. This is another example of objective data. This is data on where the kids actually live. We have schools just like this one, where the school is where the small black cross is, but the center of gravity of the kids is somewhere else. So this also tells us where to look at if we want to prioritize and fix the safety issues that are relevant for most of the kids. This is very important for us. But also, besides collecting the data, for us important is the feeling of ownership of the local community and especially of the kids. So we talk a lot with the kids. We play with Lego, do essays, we do tactical urbanism, we do models, we collect data. This is very important. And the output of all this data collection are usually maps that point out what needs to change. And also our job is to prioritize. Like, we don't have enough money to do everything. And on this map, this is a map of estimated movement of kids. Like, if they were walking, they would go this way. And the more thick the green line is, the more kids would be walking down that street. So this really tells us where to focus and where to fix the safety problems so that the impact is the largest. And yes, and so how are we doing the traffic calming? So first, as I mentioned, we collect a lot of data, and then we put all the data together. This is a document that we call School Mobility Plan, and it just summarizes everything that we learned about the neighborhood. And it says, like, what are the important safety concerns and what should be fixed first. And we present this to the mayor and to the stakeholders, to those who have money and who have power to do something about it. And then we help to change some of the problems. For example, this is problem in front of one school where there was a parking lot right in front of the gate. And because usually we don't have a lot of money, we use a lot of paint, and we use a lot of, we call it tactical urbanism tools just to deal with these problems. And yeah, this is also one of our interventions. This is School Street. This is temporary restricted entrance to the school, to the School Street, which is dead-end street. So formerly there was chaotic movement of cars, and then we decided with the local community we would close it for morning half an hour. But now I would like to tell you more about one specific case of making intervention and with also interim phase. This is one of our schools that we cooperated with since 2023. And as you can see the situation here, like, you have majority of kids living in this area, which is 5 to 10 minutes of walking. And this is zone B. Here on the right, you see zone B. So you have half a kid, 53% of kids who are driven to school. Even though they live less than 10 minutes of walking, they are driven to school by car. And we did also counting, not the previous slide was about where do the kids live. And this slide is about counting the kids that are getting off the cars versus those who are walking to school. And really, we could see that the situation is not only crazy chaotic, but really kids cannot walk to school from various reasons. We surveyed the parents, we asked them what is going on, and we came up with a solution that we wanted to test out. Well, the solution was to make the intersection more compact, to do morning traffic restriction of the street, and to create a drop-off zone on this side street, so that we created something like bypass. You wouldn't have a chance to drop off kid in front of the school, but the cars would have to go like this. This is one-way street. And what happened was that it was not working. Like, it was really not working at all. The cars, what we wanted to happen was cars using the bypass and dropping off kids somewhere else, but the drivers wanted to stay on the main road so much that they created even more chaos. They were not respecting the traffic restrictions, and they were just in this more narrow point in the street. They were just creating this crazily chaotic situation. What was the learning point was that we accepted the situation. We were trying to talk to the local community, of course, but in the final solution, we moved this drop-off zone right to the main street. But we learned that those who were walking the street, those considered the situation to be way better. So we kept the intersection more compact. We added some elevated crossings. So all these crossings are now elevated and are some of them are like continuous sidewalks. And we raised also the crossing right in front of the school gate. And the result was great. So previously there was a very crazy intersection with chaotic drop-off situation. Then in the interim stage, we were testing out the new edge, and we were testing out the drop-off zone that was really like not perfect, and it had to be tweaked. And in the built version of the space, we like incorporated the things that we learned. This was one of the schools that we spent a lot of capacities and money on, but I think everyone now accepts it as large success. And yes, and this is another school. We repeated this in this school at Barcelona, where the interim stage, this tactical urbanism, was very successful, and it didn't have to be tweaked at all. So we just, we just did it as it was designed during the interim stage, and made a very nice square there. What is important is the evaluation, and I would like just to briefly skim through these slides. But we've been working with many schools, many neighborhoods, investing lots of precious money and capacities, and evaluation has been like very instrumental for learning and for improving what we are doing. First, I would like to encourage you to invest energy in evaluation and set the right goals, because we had very good KPIs. We were lucky enough just to be able to operate quite efficiently and be able to evaluate the invested money and energy. And yes, and after doing the evaluation, it's important just to have a break and brainstorm and talk about how we can improve what we are doing. And after our first pilot stage, when we were working with 10 schools, we learned that we need to look for schools that really want us there, and we need to save more money to be able to reach necessary scale. Like in Bratislava, there's many schools who need safety fixes. And as a result of these learning points, in the end of last year, we created application-based program. That was
great stuff, Sandra. I'm just going to give you a 5-minute heads up. Thank you.
Perfect. It's 5 minutes is enough. So in the end of 2024, we created open call where we asked the schools, not only primary schools but also kindergartens and high schools, to send us applications to sign up for this program, and we wanted to choose those who are going to be our next schools in the future 2 years. We were assessing the applications according not only the objective data on traffic situation, but also about the community support. So we wanted to know how much school really wants the intervention. And this helped us to select new schools. So I'm going to be bragging now, but yes, these are the new 20 new schools we're going to be working with in the future 2 years, so in 2025 and 2026. And we're very enthusiastic because not only we are selecting from already like very cool applications from very enthusiastic community, but we selected those where we are quite sure that we can make a good impact and that the intervention that's necessary there is feasible. Okay, and I'm going to my concluding slide, like too long, didn't read. Okay, so what we wanted to do and what we perceive to be added value of our project in Bratislava, very car-centric city, very car-dependent city, where mobility has been not easy topic, is that we, through participation and through data collection and through a shift from top-down approach to bottom-up approach and really involving a community and making sure they feel certain ownership of the program, we changed this quite explosive topic to topic that it's engaging and that is framed around children's health. I think the success of our story is this application-based program, which was very successful. We're very quite happy about the number of applications that came. And yes, and I think the mayor and the whole city administration still believes that this is the flagship project through which we can reach impact and also communicate with local communities. That's the end of Bratislava story.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Again, loads to pull out there. A couple of things leapt out for me. I'll just put my face back up on the screen. Really powerful use of data, both to build the basic case. That stat about how many families live close to schools is, makes me think everyone who's looking at mobility, children's mobility, should be checking out in their own area what those stats look like. But also data around evaluation, having a clear set of measures that make sense and that can be collected and help to tell the story. The use of tactical interventions and a kind of iterative process for that if you accept that the refinement and feedback is part of the process, and that you're experimenting, you're measuring, and you're refining, and the work with schools and the central place of schools. That's really a compelling story. Now, and I'm now going to hand over to Simon Battisti from Qendra Marrëdhënie in the city of Tirana. Simon, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Gemma, for the invitation to be here. And yeah, it's really nice to share the stage here with all of this amazing work. So I'm going to just jump right in and talk about the School Streets program that we are working on in Tirana for quite a while now. So yeah, I think we have been operating as an NGO in Tirana since 2018, and it wasn't always. It was not a foregone conclusion that we would be developing a School Streets program. We were founded with a grant to support the mayor of Tirana's broader child-friendly planning agenda. And we came to, but we came to the School Street as a typology, and I think over time, as we've learned a lot from it, it's only been reinforced in what an effective type of project it is. So just really quickly, we started with interim projects. Now we've gotten to 9 permanent streets are in place, and three of those interim projects will become permanent very soon, and then we're adding another 17 permanent school streets. So the program to a large degree has been a success, and that is really owed mainly to being attractive to the communities, I think, and just the really good feedback that that the city gets from them. So, but back to 2017, I think Tim came to Tirana in 2018 or so. The city had been developing a handful of sort of signature and very high profile public spaces that were really focusing on the needs of kids. And it was a really exciting moment. But at the same time, the neighborhoods really still looked like this. And our job was to come into the situation and sort of assess a little bit and take a look at how we could sort of take a broader look at what kinds of what childhood was like at the time, and sort of what we wanted childhood to look like and to be like, and really understanding that children spend most of their time in neighborhoods very, very close to home, or at school. And I think this was a moment where we started to really understand the challenges that kind of street poses. So that kind of street is very dangerous. It's very unpleasant and very unwelcoming. And what it produces in terms of behavior, and this is really important for us, is to observe what kinds of behaviors are possible in public space, what kinds of behaviors public space enable or support or encourage even.
Simon, we're not seeing your slides changing.
Oh
Great.
no.
Now we are.
Maybe so I just keep it like this then.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Oh, wow. So you missed this. So this is an example of one of the public spaces that I was talking about. This is an example, and then this is a very typical back then and still today, a very typical sort of neighborhood scene that is just completely overwhelmed by cars, and similar to Bratislava. Albania is just adding so many new cars to the road each year, and so the kind of the space for people is really an issue. And so what does that produce? So what kinds of behaviors does that produce? Well, this is an all too typical site in Tirana, but really in so many cities around the world now, which is extremely limited autonomy for kids starting from a young age, which also leads to sort of social isolation, or sort of the lack of those kind of brain building in social interactions that we know from the literature are so important for kids to form as habit from a very young age. And now, the phone or the screen has sort of stepped in and become this crutch, has become this replacement. And we know that, from the very early studies about this, that it's just really, really bad for brain development from a young age. And so that's the kind of behaviors that we want to oppose. And what was really interesting in 2018, we asked 450 parents just about the play habits of their kids and about their preferences. And we essentially asked them, where do you want your kid to play? And what's the closest place that they can play? So what would you where would you prefer them to be, and where are they? And of course, the biggest response of what your preference is a public park, followed by a playground, and the street in front of the home is just really not where people want to be. But what kind of space is closest to your home? Nobody lives close to a public park. Public park is too far. And this is kind of, touching on Tim's point in the introduction. It was like playgrounds are, even if we do have playgrounds, there's no way for them to be close enough to where we live, actually, to go to them as often as we need to play and to have those kind of playful social interactions. So the conclusion for us from this was, okay, we're still not thinking about school streets at this moment. We're still saying, how do we build opportunities for better behaviors for kids in cities? And this survey sort of led us to this. It said, well, what we need to do here is we just need to match these up. You know, what kind of space is closest to your home? It's the street, obviously. Well, then that's the place that we need to make better. And that was really the seed of how we started to think about school streets. Um, so I think one thing I just want to kind of focus on this in this presentation today to this audience, which is I think it's really important to understand those behaviors that we know that we want, and to create and to design built environment conditions where those can happen. And I think that can be a kind of like if you know, rather than solve problems necessarily, which is a whole, you know, kind of it becomes very problematic in terms of public reaction, et cetera. But I think focusing on behaviors is a really effective, has been a really effective way for us to design. And so again, looking at a very typical situation in a neighborhood in Tirana with a young child and their caregiver, it's really it's a geometry shift. And you know, we're architects and planners, we're spatial designers, and so for us, you know, we see an image like this and we say, well, that's obvious. In order for that kid to play, the street needs to be safer, needs to feel safer, and we just need more space. And so the project really can boil down to a very like the whole school streets design approach of what we do in Tirana can be boiled down to a really simple move, which is to reduce to narrow the vehicle lane as much as possible, and to widen the sidewalk, basically have the sidewalk take over all of that remaining space. And you know, the street section is limited, obviously, and whatever happens in there is really the definition of, is how we define sort of fairness within the public realm. And you know, in by doing this, you sort of shift that priority, obviously. And but when you do it, you the effects are really interesting. Not only do they create more space for different kinds of activities. So when kids have more space, they can run faster, they can jump more. It's more comfortable. Caregivers also feel a little bit more at ease if their kids are doing that, if they have the space to do it. But by giving them more space, you also narrow what vehicles can do. And what vehicles can do ends up, you know, they have to drive slower, especially if you bring in bumps and other kinds of geometry. You know, they also tend to honk less. There's just a bigger sense of calm. So then the street is quieter, and those things end up, you know, in turn, again, improving that extra space that you've dedicated. And so what this looks like in plan, this again, this simple move, this simple shift in geometry. This is the first permanent school street that we did, and this is a very typical situation in Tirana where you have a single vehicle lane, a parking lane of 2.4 meters, and then two very narrow sidewalks on either side. And when you switch them, it looks like this. So you take that parking lane away, and you narrow that vehicle lane to 3 meters, and all of that extra space you give to the sidewalk on just one side. And so here's what it looked like before. So you see that narrow sidewalk, you see the chaos of cars that are sort of half parked on the sidewalk, the motorcycles sort of in between. You see, you know, kids just sort of like hanging out in the middle of the road. So the exposure to cars here is just horrendous. And you know, this is an environment, again, where no parent would allow their kid to just kind of roam around, even you know, for 1 minute, let alone any other kind of activity. And so, you know, with that sidewalk extension, by creating a sidewalk that is 4 meters instead of 1.2 meters, you create a situation where all of these other kinds of behaviors can happen. And so, you know, this one, I really love the possibility of walking shoulder to shoulder. I think for parents picking up their kids at school, it's a really It's not something that probably come to your head when you're thinking about what, if you were just brainstorming, what kinds of behaviors should be possible here. But walking shoulder to shoulder with two kids is something which is an experience that ends up being really precious. The other thing that happens is, it's not, even though we're focused on kids, this really becomes a space that works for everyone. And this is this very common phrase that we talk about in child-friendly urban planning, which is, if it works well for kids, then it really does work for everybody. And I think this photo just so proves that to us, which is, these are people who are waiting for kids to come out of school, but they're also friends, and this is also a social situation, and they're really comfortable here. They're so and what's interesting to me also about this image is that if you're able to sit with your back that close to the asphalt, you know that this is a really slow street. You know that this is a really comfortable situation. So again, here we're seeing that kind of really rich combination of not only extending a sidewalk, but also at the same time narrowing and restricting a traffic lane. So, we knew that we wanted to improve kids' autonomy. We knew that we wanted places to play and feel comfortable to spend time outside. And of course, school streets are not in front of everybody's door. They're a demonstration of what a street can be. They're also a really useful way to, talk to the public, talk to communities and neighborhoods about what streets can be, in the hopes that, every neighborhood street could easily be like this. But what's really interesting then is that, all of these behaviors that we know from the literature that we want these, and I could have written out a list, and but then you just see them happen organically, and it's really powerful because, you realize that you don't have to lecture parents about how to parent well. You don't have to lecture parents that you should read to your kid and that you should, spend time outside at all. You can just make the spaces and it happens organically. And I think that's really a crucial lesson for us, and one that I really like to communicate to everybody. And I really encourage this kind of approach because we don't have to lecture anybody. I think it's really important that people want to do what they want to do, let them be in a way, but again, create the spaces that are healthy for them and supportive of healthy behaviors. So stuff like this. So again, talking about school streets, I don't, our solution in Tirana is really at the length of a single block. I wish that we had more of an impact on people's mobility choices, but I do think about these more just sort of as public plazas, or sort of more as just sort of public space rather than mobility solutions. But I think they do have some impact. And I think over time, with other kinds of features added onto them, they could have more as well. And I think, what's really great about school streets, what's so powerful about them is that they can be closed really easily, and they have all of this amazing social potential to them. So this is obviously a school street which is done, which has on the left side a vehicle lane that on a typical day is moving cars, but in this case it's so easy to close it down, and it becomes such an incredibly rich space in ways that function better than a street that does not have a school street in terms of being able to host a party.
Great stuff, Simon. You got 5 minutes.
Thanks, Tim. So just a little bit more of the kind of the nitty gritty and the design here. The other thing about the school streets that's really important is to have to deal with this giant flux of kids that all have to come through one door at one moment. And this is kind of a justification for why I think we all, any those of us on this call who are interested in improving cities for kids, the school is a really important place to focus on because of this moment of stress in the morning, both for kids and caregivers. There's no other building in any city that has to fit 500, 600, 700 kids all through one door at one time. And so there's this incredible flux. And one of the things that this School Street project does, and the design solution that we think about, that we apply throughout the city, is easing that. And so this is what this looks like. So this is a before. So here you have the parking lane, everybody backed up, basically people getting let out right at the door in a single file line, one at a time. This is that transition from before to after. So you see basically the parking lane just becomes the vehicle lane. And now what can happen is that people can filter down into that safe space and then to the door. And in this one, we've got 5 cars backed up that are all unloading at the same time. So this really does kind of, again, you wouldn't necessarily think of this as part of the way to kind of reduce the stress of the morning, but we have found that it really does make a huge difference. So again, this is the before and after on one of these streets. Just to say again, the 3-meter lane plus that extra sidewalk space really work to make a very, very comfortable public space. Moving really quickly now, just what the anatomy of these really are. So we narrow to a single lane. We also reduce the speed limit to 20 kilometers an hour, but we have to ensure that drivers cannot exceed 20 kilometers an hour. We learned early on that just posting the sign is not enough, and even just narrowing to 3 meters is not really enough. You also have to add other things, and for sure speed bumps. When you have the space, we also like to add chicanes or horizontal movement for cars. And then to the greatest extent, and then it's lighting, seating, then you add all the comfort to make them, successful public spaces and places where people want to stay. And also, whenever possible, you're co-creating those. So building those out with the schools. Just a little bit more about the logistics. The timeline for this looks like the fastest that we've ever built one of 110 meters long was 16 weeks. And that was actually the most recent one. So what's important also about this, and I never have enough time to really dive into this, but it's actually kind of the most interesting part of the whole pilot program for me, which is who built them. And in Tirana, in the early days of the Vulii administration, it was the city started posting things like this, and I started noticing this. I said, that's very interesting that the maintenance department is extending a sidewalk. And it turns out that the maintenance department, the streets maintenance department, has all of these, has the skill set that's required to build a pilot school street. It's just that the design is a little bit different. So we ended up building out for the last 4 years all of the interim and all of the permanent school streets with the in-house construction team from the maintenance department. And so that's been a really, really interesting experience to be able to understand materiality, what's durable, what's not. And of course, the maintenance team being specialists in that makes a big difference. So we've been able to kind of make a really successful, and I think durable and extremely cheap. So my last slide here is just about the cost of these, which is that with this method, it's really, really inexpensive. If we consider that labor is coming from the city, and that essentially they've got bricks in-house from their maintenance budget, then and we're doing things like this, like reusing the fence and turning it into a bike rack. If we're resourceful and creative with materials, we can keep these really, really cheap. And as Sandra mentioned, it's so important for scale. If we really want to make these things go everywhere in the city as fast as possible, they have to be really inexpensive. So I will stop there. Other than just to say, in terms of behaviors and what kinds of behaviors streets can support, it's really important to also be able to bring people in, engage kids from the neighborhood to build out, and of course the students from the school to have a hand in the creation of the street, in the design of the street, what it looks like, what it feels like. So I think streets can, or especially around schools, are really wonderful foundations to build out or reinforce communities. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciated that sort of very strong framing around children's, the lived experience, to use the jargon, that actually thinking about the texture, the everyday experiences of children, and how we can create the conditions for healthy and playful experiences, and also that takeaway around sort of sweating your assets, that different cities will have different budgets, skill sets, teams, but in Tirana you figured out how to make really good use of the teams you've got. Terrific. I'm now going to hand over to our final speaker, Anna Schledorn, who is Youth Welfare Planner and Child Friendly City Coordinator in the city of Regensburg in Germany. Anna, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to show you today some of our work we do in Regensburg. I can only scratch the surface in such a short time because we have a very comprehensive approach, but I hope it gives a good first impression. Next slide, please. The city of Regensburg has about 2,000 years of history. It was a fortress founded in 175 AD. And then in the 12th and 13th centuries, it had a flourishing economy, and there were about already 20,000 inhabitants, which is a lot. It was like one of the biggest cities with Cologne in Germany. And now it's UNESCO World Heritage, and for one of the biggest ensembles of historical monuments in the world. Regensburg has around 170,000 inhabitants. Actually, I just found out yesterday, now it's 75,000. So it's growing rapidly. And it has done family and child-friendly politics since the end of the 80s, early 90s. Back then, because city leaders considered it to be an important economical factor, but also because play and child-friendliness, in our view, is important for healthy child development, also brain development, body development, and social development. And a child-friendly city, in our eyes, is a city that implies children's rights. So, next slide, please. We have a broad framework for our child-friendly urban planning. The master plan of play was put together with child and youth participation, and it sets quality standards for child-friendly urban planning and development in general, but also specifically for child-friendly housing and neighborhoods, and for independent mobility of teens and children, and for a network of public spaces to play. Network, I mean, so they are all connected, so a child can get from one to the other. High quality urban green, motivation for sports and exercise, to enforce healthy development in schoolyards, parks, youth centers, and for child-friendly urban spaces, downtown spaces. And we also have standards for youth participation. We have rules and regulations passed by the city council for any urban planning done by the community or by external developers. For example, for all the planning that has an impact on children, they have to do youth participation. We have a required amount of square meters they have to do for every inhabitant in new neighborhoods, stuff like that. The city has certain policies also. For example, developers must pay a deposit into a pot as much as it costs to build what they're supposed to build, and only get the money back if the playground and the park is meeting the stipulated standards. And the Apartment of Youth Work, which is also me, we support the process by giving our input. We know the view of the kids and put that into the planning process, and we monitor also the processes. Next slide, please. We guarantee reliable participation of children and teens, and we have a diverse youth council, a child council group, and we do master plans of play in different neighborhoods. where we assess them in detail. We let kids represent their interests in urban planning processes, plan all playgrounds with the kids in the neighborhood, etc. Next slide, please. Now, my first example is an example of how we develop child-friendly new neighborhoods. We do overall the overall plan for the neighborhood, and there we try to ensure a family and child-friendly environment by setting standards to ensure the apartments are planned with outdoor quality for families, communication areas outside, and private playgrounds right in front of the houses. So moms and dads can watch their kids from the window, and even younger ones, like 5-year-old ones, can play outside without the adult right there. Even little features like can the children reach the doorbells are important for child-friendly house planning. In addition to the private playgrounds, the developers must build 1.5 square meter public playground for every inhabitant, minimum size 500 square meters. And from the get-go, we require developers to include in their plans the necessary infrastructure like public transport, schools, daycares, medical, groceries, etc. So everything has to be close and reachable. The city of Regensburg also sets regulations that the developers have to build low income and subsidized housing. Lately, that has been, for example, 60% of the condos. And it has to be right between the other houses, or even like here, you see those apartments, some are high-end finishes and others are on the lower end side, but they live within the same house. So we don't form ghettos, but people get to know each other and come together. The city, next slide, please. The city plans new neighborhoods in a way that supports independent mobility of children and teens, because kids need to be able to spend time without supervision, to roam about. It's important for healthy development. It's also good for our climate, but I think Tim and also Simon talked enough about that. In addition, our city tries to improve child-friendly mobility in older and existing areas throughout the city. So, for example, we have slow traffic streets and underground parking, pedestrian zones, safe connections to playgrounds and schools, sidewalks, bike paths, and bike and scooter parking. In the bottom left picture, you can see a scooter parking in front of an after-school care facility, and public transport. Our kids get themselves to schools and playgrounds by biking, walking, and taking the public transport. And it's also enforced by the headmasters of the schools, telling the parents in the beginning of the school year to let them walk or bike to school. Next slide, please. Here you can see the new neighborhood Nibelungenquartier on the left. There's a preliminary design. It has approximately 1,800 new apartments with about 2,700 new inhabitants. You can see the park area, the green areas, that was pretty much built as like it is planned here. And the houses were later arranged within the red, in the white windows, and they're surrounded by red. And you can also see surrounded by red on the right, for example, where there are also little trees in there. That's the street where the cars go. So traffic was kept outside the living areas, and it's a 30-kilometer street, so it's slow traffic. There are only pedestrian routes and bike paths, private green with private playgrounds and outdoor quality of stay, so the kids can roam freely, and the slow traffic street is really mostly at the side. So here in the picture, you can see what you see there is it's all bike path and pedestrian streets and little playgrounds. Next slide, please. There's a direct connection of all houses away from motorized vehicles to the public urban green play and sports areas, and a builder's playground where kids can build their own play structures, and the quarters youth center. Next slide, please. Now, my second example is the park you have seen on the plan. It's called Brixen Park. The park was built within this new neighborhood. It's accessible, child-friendly, inclusive, and ecological. It was given the German Play Space Award and the Child-Friendly City Inspire Award by UNICEF. Our Freiraum concept, that is free space and urban green concept, sets the goal of 20 square meter urban green per inhabitant, and the investor must bring 12 square meter within the new neighborhood, and the city will then add 8 square meters wherever needed in the city. So this way we ensure that there is enough urban green for reachable for everybody all throughout the city. In this quarter, we had done a master plan of play with child and youth participation, and it showed the needs within the neighborhoods that were surrounding the new neighborhood. That was more urban green spaces with quality of stay for recreation and connection, getting to know each other, urban gardening, space for play for kids, space for sports for teens, areas of natural play, experience with nature, where kids could shape their environment, which is also why we built the builders playground here. There was also a need for inclusive space, accessibility for people with disabilities, space for low-income families to sit outside in the summer, celebrate birthdays, or just hang out together outside because they don't have their own gardens. Safe connections for bikes and pedestrians between the neighborhoods, away from the big streets. Our Bauland model sets the regulation that the investor has to provide all the needs that are caused by new neighborhoods. That is streets, sewers, but also schools and daycares and urban green and playgrounds. So here, the investor in the city made a contract that contains what's his right to build, and also what he was obligated to put in addition to meet public needs. And so he had to pay this deposit that I mentioned before, and only got it back when the playground and urban green was approved by the city and taken over in public administration. This park was set right between the houses in order to be accessible, and it connects the neighborhood safely away from cars and bikes. It was built in a sustainable way, not only by using sustainable materials, but also by keeping old trees and planting over 600 new trees, including also ecological compensation areas within the park. So the people can use those as well, and setting specific maintenance concepts for the different areas of the park. Next slide, please. Our park has attractive features for all generations, like nature, recreation parts, urban gardening, a barbecue area, for also important for the lower income families, a dog park, environmental education trail, a pool area, sports park with basketball and beach volleyball, and play that is not only playgrounds, but it's important. There's play for nature with bushes and meadows and with flowers, like meadows that aren't mown all the time, and at the same time they're also right next to it there are lawns that are mown regularly, so kids can do ball games. We have these little play islands all over the park. For the youth play islands, we did youth participation with disadvantaged teenagers, refugee kids, and kids with severe disabilities. And they all wanted, I quote, fitness for free to get buff without fitness studios, because they couldn't afford fitness studios like calisthenics, parkour, boulder, balancing, but something to hold on to when I'm scared, said some of the disabled kids. Some place to hang out with many friends and watch the boys was a wish from the girls. Place to hang and chill, cooler and bigger than a normal park bank. And you can see in the picture, oh, I'm sorry, next slide, please. Here you can see in the pictures, we have like these bouldering rocks and a calisthenics park that also our parkour like the kids that do parkour like to use it a lot. And in the back on the right side, you see this huge platform that's not a normal bench where the kids like to hang out. Next slide, please. The inclusive playground was also planned with child participation. On the right side, you see a picture. The kids invented a play dragon, and it has wheelchair accessible parts of the dragon head, the swing, sand table, table tennis tables, and the picnic tables. You can wheel under them with the wheelchair, and also a tower that's the tail, and trampolines. All various things are accessible. And for the handicapped kids, it was very important that its features that it features various tiers of difficulties with places to hold on to. Next slide, please. Now I would like to show you how we create child-friendly urban spaces, ensuring
I'm loving this, Anna, and it's so comprehensive. I'm going to give you a 5-minute heads up.
Yeah. Ensuring child-friendliness in a historic UNESCO World Heritage downtown is specifically a challenge. Our downtown historically is a city of stone and built extremely dense, and we can't just tear down houses under historic preservation order to build a typical playground. That's just not possible. So Regensburg has committed to quality standards that ensure a quality of stay and play for all generations in a special way. Instead of installing typical play equipment, we design fountains, benches, and art in a way that invites play while keeping a high design standard that fits to our historical and at the same time extremely chic downtown. For example, when the famous artist Danny Caravan developed a memorial at the place where the medieval synagogue used to be, one criteria was that it had to be a place with quality of stay for all generations. And now no parent can pass the memorial without stopping for a while to let the kids jump up and down the different heights or to play catch. It has become a place of encounter where people of all generations like to sit and to talk and watch the kids play. And the picture here on the right is just so empty because it was taken during lockdown. On the left, you can see special benches that are right in front of the Museum of Bavarian History. When school kids visit that museum, the whole class can fit on those benches and play. Next slide, please. Here you can see a few more examples on how we promote play downtown. On the left, you see an example of a round bench that the city installed around trees. It's specially designed in a way that makes it interesting for balancing for kids. And then there are these wooden play structures. We call them play points. The city has put up a couple of those, all different from one another. And they were designed with kids and provide nice play opportunities for those who live downtown, but also for families who go shopping or for tourists. And then another thing is to make fountains reachable so the kids can play with water. Here are more examples, like a bench that it also is also a fountain with water. Little steps and stone benches within the pedestrian zone where people can hang out and sit, or kids can balance or jump up and down. A creative wooden bench that was built by youngsters. We have a couple of those, and the city sets them up on various spaces throughout the summer. So here are just some examples. Now, my takeaways are child-friendly planning needs reliable standards and regulations, requirements, a collaboration between planners and pedagogical professionals, reliable and good
Anna,
quality.
you want your slides moving on again, I think.
Oh, next slide, please. Yeah. and reliable and good quality child participation, political will and understanding of the importance of a child-friendly environment for a happy and healthy population, as well as the economic welfare of the community, to understand that businesses and won't find highly trained professionals if the city is not attractive for those families to settle in Regensburg. So it's really important for our economic welfare. And then the understanding that children's rights are rights and not just a gift that is given whenever politicians or administrations feel like it. It's a right. So they have the right to play. So we have to provide an environment where they can play and get anywhere by themselves. And child friendliness needs to be comprehensive and not just one aspect. So it has to be the whole city. It has to be the way kids get around in the city. It has to be downtown. It has to be in the living neighborhoods. It has to be on the sidewalks in the streets. And it has to be parks, accessible urban green, and playgrounds, and also the housing. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Anna. And just to really pull out how comprehensive the program in Regensburg is, but both in terms of the breadth of coverage of the city and the different elements of the city, but also how child friendliness is woven into the different stages in the kind of process of public administration, the planning, the programming, maintenance. And just in case you missed it, one of the things that really got my interest about Regensburg is that, as I understand it, housing developers have to pay a kind of deposit at the outset of the development process, which kind of holds their feet to the fire to make sure that they deliver the kind of infrastructure and public spaces, and in this case a park, that were promised in the original plans. And I'm sure there are many of us on this call who've seen a big gap between what was promised and what got delivered in new schemes. And I really can't help but think we could learn a lot from Regensburg and Germany on that. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Gemma now, who's, I think, been keeping an eye on the many questions that we've had come out. And thank you all so much for those. And we'll spend the last 15 minutes or so trying to cover as many of those as we can.
Yeah, brilliant. So if I can invite Anna and Maria and Sandra and Simon just to pop their cameras back on and open up their microphones. One of the things that Anna really finished on was, the rights of children. And I think one of the questions that's right up there in the chat is that it varies across the UK, but certainly in England, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is not fully embedded into English law. And so I was just wondering if in each country it is embedded, but even better than that, it's sort of widely understood by the public, and it's sort of respected as a right to be respected amongst others. So I don't know if anyone's got any reflections on that from your location.
Well, in Germany, it's not yet in our law embedded directly, but Germany has signed it. So basically, it should be law. It is law. And child-friendly cities all throughout Germany has cities that have committed to the children's rights. And Regensburg was actually one of the first cities and the first one in Bavaria to commit to that. So within our city, it's important to make sure children's laws are living reality for our kids.
Just to add, it's certainly my experience that German municipalities and regions often have policies and legislation may not be comprehensive across the UNCRC, but it does, for instance, enshrine a kind of obligation to involve children in planning processes. So I think it's quite a lot stronger than you'd see in many other countries.
Did anyone else want to add to that, especially about is it sort of generally accepted by the public, by the population? Is it sort of understood and accepted?
Maybe I can. I'm not sure if this is answer to the question, but I'm not sure how it is about the law. But there is this in Slovakia. We have this culture of, we have this acceptance that a child is belongs to the family and is kind of property of the parents, and the people are in general very sensitive when the municipality is sharing the narrative and discourse about what is good or not good for the children. So we have to be like very careful about this, because we are perceived as those who should be taking care of public spaces. And in this project, it turned out to be like instrumental to work with the schools, with the principals, with the teachers, and to have on board the right messengers for the stories, how important it is to play outside, how important it is to be outside, grow up in the socially inclusive neighborhoods, to be able to make friends amongst neighbors. But we as a municipality are not accepted, or the messages from us are not accepted very well. So, and lesson that we learned is that's why we need the experts, just to be, to be the voice of the children's health for us.
Interesting, Sandra. Thank you. Maria?
Yeah, just to add a few ideas about the Spain situation of this. So obviously Spain has signed the convention many years ago, but and there are good advances in terms of there are specific strategies recognizing the rights of the child and specific ways to really move them forward. Mainly focus on child poverty, and more recently also violence against children and adolescents. And there are also an important movement, like Anna explained about child-friendly cities promoted by UNICEF. There are more than 300 cities with this recognition, but not with the urban impact as Anna showed us in the case of Regensburg. It's more related to have a children plan, or also participatory processes, but not really focused on children perspective in the urban planning. So there is a challenge here, clearly.
Yeah, thank you. There are lots of questions in the chat, and I'll probably come to Simon first on this, about cars and about that shift of how do we, well, let me phrase this better. How do we communicate about cars and with car users, and that sort of, if we're talking about shifting space that was once for the car and it not being for the car anymore, how do we sort of overcome some of those challenges and the cultural discourse that I think we have quite strongly in this country about, we need the car, and the car is, deserving of the space it has, and we can't live without it. So I was just wondering sort of what the experience is and any lessons around shifting away from the car and that spatial justice issue of reallocating space.
Yeah, so I have to start that answer by saying that we've been really lucky in the city of Tirana to have an administration that has fully backed us up. Every time that we ask them to remove parking, they say, don't even hesitate, just do it. So that's rare and that's unique. And we've known that's a specific period of political will that isn't necessarily going to be for forever, but while we have it, we've got to take maximum advantage of it and say, okay, we're going to really push this as far as we possibly can. So that's the first thing. The other thing, though, is, which I think is really important is that it cannot be framed as taking something away from people. We have to talk about it as what are we giving, and building a pilot is the most powerful way to do this. I was going to give kind of a similar answer to the last question about child's rights, and we are working in an environment where there's not the strongest rule of law. The political structures are not necessarily in place as firmly as they can be. The regulation or rights are not necessarily the driver of action. What we have found, though, is that when we make spaces that are loved, people respond to that very well. And we have to stop thinking that everybody's going to love everything, but rather that we're working on behalf of a group of vulnerable people who actually are the majority. We just don't hear from them that much unless we go and deliberately ask them. So they're not going to raise their hand as easily as the folks who drive. They're just louder and more privileged, and they tend to come to the forefront quicker. And just the last point on that is that what we've found with this particular layout of geometry is that it's less chaotic. This is better for drivers, and there is an argument to be made there too, at least in our environment where traffic is completely insane. And I saw a question in there that said, does it affect congestion? Like by reducing that space, what for drivers might be harmed? And the answer is you are reducing. You're taking away 12, like on that first pilot, 12 parking places, which parking moves somewhere else. And there's a common question about what do you do about parking? Do you replace it? We say no, it's not our job. Our job is kids. Our job is play and making these environments for people. My job is not to figure out where you should park your metal box. That's your private property. What you do with that is not my issue. And it's not really my responsibility to solve. It's not really the mayor's responsibility to solve either, although he has some much more heat than I do as an NGO. But the parking situation especially is one that I just say, we got to protect the school. It's a duty that the school space is protected for sure.
Anna?
Well, Germans like their cars too, very much. Of course, that's a topic, but for us, it has two aspects. First of all, you have to make the alternatives so attractive that it's so much easier to just get on your bike or walk or get on a bus. And now with e-bikes, it gets even easier. I mean, we do have quite a few hills and mountains, but with e-bikes, that's no problem at all. We have more and more families also using bikes where they can sit, like these bigger bikes where they can sit their kids in also. So you have to make sure that there are good bike paths that are connected and that there's enough bike parking. And for example, in front of the schools, it's on the one hand, it's making sure that it's easy to let the kids walk to school. And then it's, as Tim said before, also the software, like we have things like, we have these emergency islands in public spaces, like in doctor offices or in shops and stores and whatever, where there's the sticker and the kids know if anything happens, if there's a bully at my school way, or if I fall down and need a bandage and somebody has, or I lost my bus ticket, I can go there and call my parents, and the kids don't even need that. The parents need it to feel more secure. And so it's or it's these games that in the beginning of the school year, all kids have to walk to school, and the ones where most kids walked every day can win a prize or something. And then the kids like walking with their friends better than being driven by the cars. It's more, it's fun to walk without supervision. If it's safe, that's okay. And for the parents, it's also much easier not having to take their kids to school, just saying bye and off you go. And the other thing is to make driving very unattractive. So or parking, for example, downtown, we need our parking spaces, and for everything they remove, they have to look where else can we do, or what alternatives can we find? How can we do car sharing points, for example, where then people who live downtown in the pedestrian area don't even need their own car, just sometimes share one. But also, for example, parking is quite expensive downtown. So for us, often it's easier to take a bus or to do alternatives, take the bike, because it might not be possible to find a parking space on certain days, or it's very expensive. So those are the alternatives.
Yeah, it's that wider sort of the wider cultural elements, but also putting in those soft measures, isn't it? Marie, you talked about the played city, which is a phrase that I am now going to adopt myself, which is a great phrase. We've talked quite a lot about school streets, but you were also talking about sort of those wider spaces as well in Barcelona. And I was wondering if the school streets work allows you to then go and do different things in different places. So if we could maybe in this country use school streets as a way to sort of test some of this ground and then make more playable neighborhoods, more playable public space. Have you found that to be true, or has it worked the other way around in Barcelona?
Yeah, in Barcelona was really strategic, this idea of spontaneously playing in the surrounding of schools, thanks to school street transformation, as a way to demonstrate that it's not only rethinking playgrounds or even reclaiming more playgrounds, because we were at that point at the very beginning, like we want more playgrounds everywhere, and it was not, no, it's not about this. It's about offering more opportunities, affordances, but not playgrounds with necessarily specific elements only in specific places to design for play. So it's very helpful to focus and get evidence that you gain ground, and obviously if you gain ground to in public space, with this idea of kind of urban acupuncture, because schools are everywhere. So it's a very strategical way to really go all around the city and make this evident.
Brilliant. Thanks, Maria. I'm afraid we have to wrap up. 15 minutes of questions is just never enough. But I really want to thank everybody, all of our speakers, everyone for joining, and Sport England for the sponsorship of this event. One of the questions about the TCPA and what we'll continue to do in this space, and we will continue to do work. We're going to look at pulling together some UK case studies, and I know that was also a question. So we are happy to work with Tim and anybody else in terms of highlighting good practice in the UK, because this is really inspiring, the things that we've heard today, and I'm sure there's lots going on in the UK as well that we would like to highlight. So yeah, please follow our work, please stay in touch, and we will be doing more, and we look forward to working with lots of you into the future on this to make a much more child-friendly England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. So thanks everybody, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.